Yusuf, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. And minutes of November the 21st, 2023. Motion to adopt, moved by Councillor Schiller, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And moving right along to Planning and Development Services 5.1.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 5.1, application 2021-320-RZ for properties located at 12209, 12219, 12231, 12241, 12251 222 Street, and 22190 123 Avenue. This is to rezone from RS1 to RM2 to permit the future construction of 2 6-story apartment buildings with a total of 152 market strata dwelling units, and staff are in attendance.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Council. This application is in relation to the above noted properties, and it's here for first reading. So the existing OCP designation is single family residential. The proposed OCP designation is low rise apartment. The existing zoning is RS1 single detached residential, and the proposed zoning is RM2 medium density apartment residential. The existing site area is approximately 1.3 acres, and the proposed site area is 1.1 acres. And the purpose is to permit the future construction of 2 6-story apartment buildings with a total of 152 market strata dwelling units. The subject map is shown on the screen above. It's outlined in red. The OCP context map is shown on the screen. The subject properties are designated single-family residential. To the north and to the west, the properties are designated urban residential. And to the east and southeast and south, the properties are designated ground-oriented multifamily or low-rise apartment. A neighborhood context map is shown. This application previously went to a committee of the whole meeting on July 6, 2021. The applicant was then proposing to rezone the subject properties from the RS1 single detached residential zone to the RM2 medium density apartment residential zone to permit the future construction of 2 4-story apartment buildings with a total of 117 market strata dwelling units. Council referred the application back to staff, considering the difference between the number of required spaces and proposed spaces for off-street parking. At the time, the applicable cash in lieu rate was $8,000 for each parking space required but not provided, for a total estimated amount of $504,000. However, the applicant was instead proposing a cash in lieu contribution of $128,000 and an additional contribution of $128,000 towards alternative transportation measures benefiting residents of the proposed development. The applicant is now proposing to rezone the subject properties from the RS1 single detached residential zone to the RM2 medium density apartment residential zone to permit the future construction of 2 6-story apartment buildings with a total of 152 market strata dwelling units. The parking rates identified for the RM2 zone are still applicable. However, though the subject properties are outside of the central business district, the applicant is again proposing parking in alignment with the reduced parking rates for the town center area plan's central business district. Staff support the application with the proposed off-street parking and variances to eliminate the need for a cash in lieu contribution in consideration of a supportive parking study and the city's proposed new off-street parking and loading bylaw, which would extend the reduced parking rates currently applicable in the central business district to the entire town center area plan with a new rate. The subject properties are located within the town center area plan and are currently designated single family residential. An OCP amendment would be required to redesignate the subject properties to low-rise apartment and allow the RM2 zone. The redesignation is supported by staff considering the emerging character of the neighborhood. There are several existing low, medium rise apartment buildings and townhouse developments to the east, to the southeast, and to the south of the subject properties. The properties with single detached residences to the east of the subject properties are designated ground-oriented multifamily and will likely be redeveloped over time. The boundary for the town center area plan is to the north and to the west of the subject properties. These areas will likely be redeveloped over time as well. There's an in-stream development application at third reading to rezone the properties to the north and construct a 7-story mixed-use building with a neighborhood daycare and 105 dwelling units. The proposed development's unit configuration would be as per the table shown on the screen. 51 units would be 1-bedroom units, 92 units would be 2-bedroom units, and 8 units would be 3-bedroom units. In terms of the 3-bedroom units, the applicant is proposing 5% of all units as 3-bedroom units. The proposed development would have a density of approximately 2.38 FSR based on the proposed site area after lot consolidation and road dedication. The development utilizes the RM2's allowable density of 1.8 FSR and additional density of 0.58 FSR through a density bonus contribution at a rate of $15 per square foot for a total estimated amount of approximately $408,000. Pursuant to Council Policy 6.31, the applicant is subject to the Community Amenity Contribution Program at a rate of $5,600 per unit for a total estimated amount of approximately $851,000, or such applicable rate at third reading of this application. The proposed development would include 1 level of underground parking shared between both buildings and 1 story of concealed above ground parking for the southern building. The concealed above ground parking would be surrounded by terraced landscaping to improve the streetscape. The concealed above ground parking is necessary due to a water level and blue-gray clay level, which make it infeasible to provide a second level of underground parking. The applicant is proposing to have vehicular access to the underground parking from 123rd Avenue and vehicular access to the concealed above ground parking from Delcrest Street. Any variations from the requirements of the proposed RM2 zone will require a development variance permit. Based on a preliminary review, the proposed development will require a development variance permit to vary the required setbacks, vary the required number of off-street residential and visitor parking spaces, and vary the required number of short-term or visitor bicycle parking spaces. Sorry, next slide. The required and proposed setbacks would be as per the table shown on the screen. So in terms of the northern lot line, the required setback for principal buildings is 7.5 meters. The applicant is looking to go down to 4 meters. From the rear lot line or southern lot line meters, and the applicant is looking to go down to 5 meters. From the western side lot line, the requirement is 7.5 meters, and the applicant is looking to go down to 5.8 meters. And from the exterior side lot line or eastern lot line, the principal building setback is 7.5 meters, and the applicant is looking to go down to 6.2 meters. In terms of parking, it would be as per the table shown on the screen, what is required and what is proposed. So under the current bylaw, the required parking is 259 spaces. Under the proposed parking bylaw, the requirement would be 182 spaces. But under the current bylaws CBD rate, it would be 178 spaces that are required, and the applicant is proposing 181 spaces. In terms of long-term bicycle parking spaces, the applicant is proposing 78 spaces, which exceeds the current requirement of 38 spaces, and they're proposing 6 spaces of short-term bicycle parking spaces, which falls short of the 42 required spaces, but they're making up for it by providing an excess of long-term bicycle parking spaces. Again, as previously noted, staff support the application proceeding with the proposed parking and variances to eliminate the need for a cash in lieu contribution in consideration of the city's proposed new off-street parking and loading bylaw which extends the reduced parking rates currently found in the Central Business District throughout the Town Center area plan. The proposed site plan is shown on the screen. These are elevations from the eastern side. These are elevations from the western side. And here are some perspectives. The report recommendations are that the zone amending bylaw be given first reading, and further that the applicant submits a complete application, including detailed information and technical reports for the official community plan amendment, rezoning, town center development permit, and development variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe the applicants in the audience, are they doing a presentation or just here to answer questions?
They're here to answer questions.
Thank you very much. I have a motion to move it forward, please. Moved by Councillor Youssef, second by Councillor Schiller. Any questions of council? Councillor Carreras.
And just a quick question around the parking pieces. So the parking lieu, I saw 128,000 in cash and then 128,000 for other transportation measures. What does the alternative transportation measures look like for the residents?
That, through the chair, that was what was proposed previously.
Okay, so that's not.
That is not applicable at this stage.
Okay, so it's just the flat fee.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff for the presentation. And I did just want to ask about the parking as well. So it would seem that the vehicle parking that's being proposed falls in line with the proposed off-parking bylaw. The vehicle parking meets or exceeds what would be required under the proposed off-parking bylaw.
Through the chair, the proposed off-street parking and loading bylaw would require 182 off-street parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 181 parking spaces, but it still exceeds the requirement that for the Town Center Central Business District, which is 178 parking spaces.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the long-term bicycle parking, that does not seem to meet the proposed requirements. Is there any information available on the decision, how they got to the number of parking spaces that are proposed for the long-term bikes?
I can let through the chair, I can let the applicant speak to that.
Okay, would you like to come down to the microphone, please?
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. The challenge that we've had, and we're happy to work with staff and try to find more space and redesign, is with the geometry within the parkade, providing as much parking as possible. Right now, we're providing 78 long-term bike stalls, which is a surplus above the requirements right now. We're happy to look at and try to get more in there. I would rather under promise and over deliver and come back with something more. This is just when we're looking at geometry and how to make those as useful. Where our buyer at the end of the day, a Maple Ridge resident, can actually utilize it and get a bike in or out. I don't want to show something on paper that looks good on paper, but is not actually usable. And so we came forward with what we proposed, but happy to work with staff to try to get some additional parking for the bicycles.
Thank you for that. Is there any plans to include any charging capabilities down in the long-term bike storage area for e-bikes?
That's one thing that we're looking at right now, kind of across the Lower Mainland. A lot of municipalities have put a requirement in for that. We do typically provide outlets for that. The one item we're looking at is how that impacts stratas. And is there a concern of having batteries in an area that may not be frequented as much as possible and having them charge? Are there any safety concerns? But as of right now, what we're planning for this is to have 110 outlets in so they can be charged.
Thank you. And just finally, I did want to ask about the short-term bicycle parking as well, and just, yeah, looking for any information of how you got to the number of 4 spots.
So right now, it's really, is there any possibility to go back to the site plan? By any chance, it might be easier to look at a photo. Yeah, site plan would be great. So right now, the challenge that drives this entire project is the blue-gray clay, and it pushes everything up. And so to try to provide as much parking as possible, there's terrace landscaping around one of the buildings and partially around part of the other. And so to provide that and have it properly landscaped with green space, so you're not just seeing blank walls, there's a fine balance of places that you can actually get bikes, have it on the property and not on city property, and store enough. But again, we're happy to work with staff if there's a strong desire from council to have additional short term to look at where that balance is in our next application as this moves forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Counselor Tam.
Thank you, Chair. Through you into the staff or the applicant, and just following up on Councillor Schiller's question about the short-term, particularly the long-term bicycle parking. I'm just wondering if maybe staff or the applicant could kind of speak to the trade-offs a little bit about sort of what we can look at here. Maybe just walk us through the thought process of what those kinds of trade-offs can look like.
Apologies, I was walking back. So that's trade-offs between the short-term and long-term bicycle parking.
Pardon me,
Sorry.
just in the interest of, I heard you say earlier that we can try and make that work, if we were to increase the long-term bicycle parking in order to meet the proposed bylaw. Could you just talk us through sort of the process it would take to get there in terms of?
So
I think in my head, I'm thinking about the trade-off ratio of in terms of space efficiency of how much space it takes to park a car versus park a bike, that kind of.
It comes down to that, and it's looking at the geometry, drive aisle width requirements, parking space requirements. We can take a look at instead of providing as many full-size parking stalls, it doesn't make sense to adjust some of those to small. If we can adjust a couple to small, does that allow for enough room to get a bit more bike parking in? It's that fine balance. And also, as we move forward through the process, there's more information that comes from our consultants when it comes to the services and the associated service rooms that are in a parkade. For water entry, mechanical, electrical. And if we can adjust those sizes and squeak an extra foot out here or there, we typically don't like to go in too aggressive in early phase drawings like this and show something that we're not sure of being able to hit. But as we progress, we can adjust that and try to pick up additional bike parking where possible.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. It's helpful to, as not as a builder myself, it's helpful to hear sort of that thought process so I can better understand. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
So thank you.
Counselor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff and to the applicant for the clarifications provided thus far. Through you to staff, Madam Chair, when we're looking at this application and the off-street parking bylaw hasn't fully been passed through council, would this application then be considered an in-stream application, and where would it apply? Would the rules apply to the old parking, off-street parking bylaw, or to the one that's yet to be passed?
Through the chair, the proposed parking would require variances to the current off-street parking and loading bylaw. And if the proposed off-street parking and loading bylaw is adopted, it would still require a variance for the one space.
Sorry, that doesn't quite clarify it to me, Madam Chair, through you to staff. So are we looking at this application under the current existing off-street bylaw?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so all in favor of moving it forward? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.
Thank you. Item 5.2 is application 2019-051-RZ. at properties located at 11405 236th Street to rezone from RS3 to RM1 to permit the future construction of 18 townhouse units, and staff are in attendance to present.
Good morning.
Morning, Madam Chair and Committee. This application is an area that's designated urban residential and conservation. The existing zoning is RS3, a single detached rural residential, and the proposed zoning is RM1, low density townhouse residential. The existing site area is 5 acres, and the proposal is to permit the construction of 18 townhouse units. This is a site on the cadastral map showing the creeks on the western portion of the site. This is the OCP designation map showing the large area conservation on the western area of the site where the creeks are located, and the urban residential designation on the eastern part of the site. And the photo, the ortho photo showing the creeks in the built environment, showing townhouses to the north and single family homes to the east, and townhouses to the south as well. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the subject site from RS3 to RM1 to permit construction of 18 townhouse units. The proposed townhouse development will have 17 4-bedroom units and 1 3-bedroom unit. The western part, as noted, is creek corridor and designated conservation and would be dedicated as park for protections of slopes and the water courses. There's a density bonus contribution of up to 0.15 FSR to the total maximum of 0.75 FSR through the density bonus provisions in the RM1 zone. The application meets the requirements of the off-street parking and loading bylaw. The applicant is proposing 2 parking spaces per townhouse and 4 visitor parking spaces. And each townhouse unit will have a bike rack for storage in the garage. There's an OCP amendment required to adjust or actually enlarge the conservation designated area. The current area designated conservation, the OCP, is approximately 3.42 acres, and an additional 0.36 acres is being added to the conservation area due to the detailed reports and ground truthing found through the application. It has to be enlarged a bit, the park area, conservation area. And pursuant to the council amenity contribution policy, there'd be a $7,400 contribution per unit for a total of $133,200 of community amenity contribution at the rate applicable at third reading. There are a number of development variance permit requests that would come forward should this application proceed through to development permit, and they are outlined below to reduce the rear lot line from 7.5 meters to 4.44 meters, to reduce the southern interior lot line from 7.5 to 3.9 meters, and to make a number of minor height variance requests from 9.5 meters to the range of about 9.9 to 10.18 meters. And as noted, that be in these variances in a future report regarding the development permit after third reading. This is the site plan showing the development off of the main arterial road there and showing the configuration of the townhouses with basically shaped the configuration of the geometry of the lot and keeping the rest of the site designated and dedicated as park. These are perspectives showing a view from 236th Street going into the development, and a perspective from the front entry off the public road into the development head on, and perspectives within the development. And an elevation with the details of how the building looks in construction elevation form. And another one showing another building elevation of the longest building unit there with 6 units. And the recommendations are the standard recommendations which are on the screen in your report regarding the bylaw. I'm going to just go into detail on the conditions as they're the same in most of these reports. The following conditions and terms would be required to be met before final reading. The registration of a rezoning servicing agreement as a covenant and receipt of the security deposit that was provided in the agreement. An amendment to the OCP as noted to expand the conservation area, road dedication on 236th Street, park dedication as required, including the construction of emergency access roads and removal of debris and garbage from the dedicated parkland for that large area on the western part of the site. There'd be registrations of restrictive covenants for a geotech report for the stability of the site, and registration of a right-of-way for access to city works and vehicles to get to the western part of the site. That's linked to the construction of the emergency access road under the park dedication, so the city may gain access to that area if needed. And registration of restrictive covenants to protect the visitor parking and for stormwater management, and then removal of the existing buildings, and just confirmation through the disclosure statement that there's no requirement for any holds on this application going forward to DVP and development permit issuance. And then also the standard condition that there's confirmation that there's no underground fuel storage tanks, and if so, there'd have to be a Site 1 investigation report to ensure the property is not contaminated. And the voluntary contribution, the amount of $133,200 for the community many contributions under the community many contribution policy, and a density bonus contribution, the amount of $204,500 in keeping with the RM1 density bonus provisions for major corridor residential. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Dozy. Any questions? Councillor Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation. I would like to just ask about 236 and sort of the classification of that road. In the report, it says that 236 is not identified as a major corridor, but it is built to a collector standard. And can somebody just go over what the differences are between a major corridor and a collector road?
Certainly. So the major corridors are outlined in the OCP, and they typically are arterial roads and collector roads. There are some roads that are built to a collector standard, like the major corridors are, but aren't designated. And this one happens to be built to a collector standard, but not designated as a major corridor. And in the official community plan, there's a provision that says that you are able to have multifamily townhouse projects on a major corridor or a road that's constructed to a major corridor standard. And that's what this is. It's constructed to a major corridor standard.
236 is
Yes,
constructed
in the
to a
application.
major corridor standard in
To a
this
collector road
location.
standard, yes.
To a collector standard. So can you just explain to me just like what some features are that make up the collector standard? Like, is it a wider road, or is there certain,
Yes, it has a wider right of way and wider pavement. And for the details, I'll turn over to Rachel Owenberger, in engineering.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, a collector standard road allows 2 travel lanes, 2 parking lanes, and then has a fairly standard boulevard for street trees, sidewalk, street lighting. But the main difference between a collector and a local is a designated parking lane.
on both sides?
Correct.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Is that all the questions?
No, if you don't mind, I had one more. It was in regards to the garbage collection. And I think in the report, there was some question about like the location of the garbage bin for the development and some mention of curbside pickup. So I guess I just want to make sure that the proponent understands that we don't have curbside pickup here, and that they understand they do need to address that in a different way.
We will speak to the applicant about that to ensure if they don't know that, they will know that.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the report and presentation. A couple of quick questions concerning the dedication of parkland there. So assuming that it'll be added to our parks and recreation stock of parks that are accessible to the general public, through you, Madam Chair, is that a safe assumption?
Yes, that this area is being dedicated as conservation park, as is typical for Creek Corridor developments.
Thank you for that. And through you, Madam Chair, does that mean that any improvements such as putting through trails or possibly bridges over the waterways would be the responsibility of the municipality?
Yes, we don't have any plans to do that at this point, but any construction works in the future for trails or bridges would be something that would be dealt with our environment section and planning and the Parks Department.
Excellent, thank you. Lastly, through you, Madam Chair, speaking to the topographic nature of the lands that are to be dedicated as park, there was mention of slopes and water courses going through it, of course. So my question ultimately is, if a person was to access the park, would they be able to walk their dog through it, or would they need more of a mountain goat to get through it?
Madam Chair, through to Councillor Youssef, there isn't a planned trail there, so it would be something that would have to be dealt with parks. We don't encourage walking in conservation parks unless there's a provision for a specific trail. So,
Thank you. And speaking more importantly to the slopes, how extensive are those slopes on the property, through the chair?
the slopes include the area that's basically all the conservation areas that includes the slopes, and then continuing down to the west, so approximately half the site into a creek ravine.
Sorry, maybe I'm not being clear. How big of a slope is it? Can a person easily access it, or is it such a slope that it's not readily accessible is my question. Ultimately what I'm trying to get to.
Madam Chair, Councillor Youssef, I'd have to look into that and can report back to that on council. Don't know
Thank you
offhand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carreras. You're good? All right. Councillor Can.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And through you, I just had a few questions about, just to make sure I understand the rezoning of this property. I just, between the conservation land and the urban residential, just to check, are the boundaries of the conservation land being adjusted at all?
Yes. So
Okay.
Madam Chair, to Councillor Tan, they're being enlarged because the conservation designation in the OCP was taken off broad general mapping. And then when we
Right.
do the ground truthing of detailed environmental and geotech reports, the
Right.
top of bank is often adjusted. In this case, it was adjusted to increase the conservation area and reduce the developable area by about 1,400 square meters.
Right. And just to make sure I understand, I see in the report, there's an appendix C that shows the conservation land and the urban residential. Is that the new, is that what will be if the application goes through?
Yes, the proposal is to increase the conservation designation to reflect the detailed reporting on the site.
I see,
Yes.
thank you. And my last question to you, Madam Chair, is there, in terms of the creek and the waterway, so is there an infringement of the development on the creek or the waterway, or does the conservation land ensure that the development stays clear of that?
Yes, the conservation land extends onto the flat to the required setback through the Environment Department's review of the environmental reports. So conservation area extends into the flat area, the
Wonderful.
setback that's required.
Thank you. I think I made you repeat that three
Yeah.
different times, 3 different ways. So thank you
That's
for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor of moving it forward? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.3, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Item 5.3 is application 2021-280-RZ located at 22306 122 Avenue to rezone from RS1 to RT2 to permit the future construction of a fourplex.
Madam Chair, Committee. The designation on the proposed site is ground-oriented multifamily, and the proposed rezoning is from RS1 single detached residential to RT2 ground-oriented residential. And the lot size is approximately a quarter acre, and the proposal is to permit the construction of a fourplex. This is a site, it's one small site that's left sort of orphaned at the corner of 122nd Avenue and 23rd Street. And this is the designation here, actually reflecting that. There's apartment designation, low rise to the north and to the west. And then the site is designated ground oriented multifamily. And that reflects that there's apartments built to the west and to the south. So this is a remnant lot that has a designation that supports this remnant lot use, given the existing parking or residential apartment buildings around. The proposed development is, as noted, for a forest dwelling unit in the form of a fourplex. Each unit will have 2 unenclosed parking spaces as per the parking bylaw and 1 visitor spot. There's 1 parking space per dwelling unit that will be provided with roughed-in infrastructure for level 2 charging. The city engineering department will require road dedication of 4 meters from the subject property along 223rd Street with a corner cut or truncation at the intersection of 223rd Street and 112th Avenue. The dedication will decrease the lot area from 930 square meters to 786 square meters. So the proposed development is in keeping with the official community plan, and there would be a community amenity contribution of $7,400 per unit, or $22,000 at the rate applicable at third reading. There are no proposed variances for this application, but there is a site-specific amendment due to the very large amount of road dedication being given as a result of the application. And because the road dedication requirement reduces the lot area to below the required amount, there's a site-specific amendment to allow for a fourplex on a lot that exceeds 780 square meters, given the very large amount of road dedication off a small site. Occasionally, we do this when there's excessive road dedication, rather than to penalize a small lot and reduce their developability. So before you are the conditions. I'll just summarize them very briefly. The first is registration of rezoning servicing agreement as a covenant and receipt of the security as outlined in the agreement. Approval of the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure as it's within 800 meters of a controlled access highway, Lougheed Highway, road dedication on 223rd Street, registration of a covenant for a geotechnical report on the suitability of the site, a covenant registered for stormwater management, removal of the existing building, and the standard requirements for confirming that the site is not contaminated. And if so, there'd be a stage 1 investigation required to ensure the site is not contaminated before issuance of development permit and development variance permit or development permit. There's also a voluntary contribution, the amount of $22,200 per unit, or for the project, or $7,400 per unit, in keeping with the community amenity contribution policy. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, second by Mayor Rumi. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. 5.4.
Thank you. The next application is 2021-389-RZ for properties located at 11619, 11631, 11639 Adair Street to rezone from RS1 to RT2 to permit the future construction of 3 triplexes on 3 separate lots, and staff are in attendance.
Hello.
Madam Chair,
again.
Committee, I thought I had a break, but no. This application here is in an area designated urban residential, and the existing zoning is RS1 single detached residential, and the proposed zoning is RT2 ground oriented residential. And the site area is 0.63 acres approximately. And the proposal is to permit the construction of 3 duplexes on 3 separate lots. So these are the 3 lots on Adair Street. 3 lots showing it in the urban residential designation. And the 3 of the lots showing it on the orthophoto, showing the single family nature of Adair Street and the townhouse project, just located to the west off of Lougheed Highway. So as noted, the current proposal is to construct 3 triplex in each of 3 separate lots. Each residential each residential building will have a double car garage on each of the units, and also have 2 visitor spots. So each unit, each of the 3 units has double car garages on each lot, and each of those lots has 2 visitor spaces. It's quite a high ratio compared to apartments that have 1 for every 5 units. There's 2 for 3 units in this case. The triplex on each lot will have 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. 1 bedroom will be located on the ground floor of each triplex, and maybe an opportunity for persons with needs for accessibility. Proposed development is compliant with the OCP, which permits in the urban residential designation up to triplex rezonings, which this is. Pursuant to the council policy and many contributions, the 3 different triplexes and the 3 lots would have a total of $66,000 of community many contributions payable. This is a site plan showing Adair Street to the right, going north-south, and each of the units, the site plans showing the driveway in, sort of almost like a little bit of a courtyard for each of the triplexes, and then the 2 visitor spots just off the entrance to the driveway. And this is a perspective here showing the 3 triplexes built on the 3 different lots. The bubbling is just, there have been some changes that staff and the ADP requested. They still remain on the drawing. This is another perspective showing the rear of those from the back that would be facing onto the townhouse project to the west. So the recommendations are that there be the registration of the standard rezoning service agreement as a covenant and the receipt of the security, restrictive covenant for stormwater management as required normally, removal of existing buildings, and also the site disclosure statement confirming there's in addition to the site disclosure statement, in this case, there's no underground fuel storage tanks. That may be a problem. If there are, there'd be a stage 1 investigation required. It's a standard condition. And then voluntary contribution, the amount of $66,000 or $7,400 in community many contributions for each for the whole project. Madam Chair, committee.
Thank you very much. I have a motion to move it forward, please. Moved by Councillor Youssef, second by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Councillor Carreras.
I just have a quick question. It actually applies to a few things around here today, and it's something that we talked about before, but removal of the existing buildings. Now, I know that's part of our process to remove, but there have been discussions in the past around if these spaces that are currently being rented, are we able to postpone the removal of the building just because of the housing crunch that we're in?
Madam Chair, to Councillor Carreras, that is a possibility if it doesn't cause an issue with things such as road dedication. We can't have a house being kept on a lot that would be sitting on road dedication, which we require. It could be something that we look at from time to time. If it wasn't preventing the delivery of public goods such as parks and roads, and we'd probably have to have another covenant register on title just to ensure that it was known that that building would be removed and a security deposit to ensure it's removed. That's something that's been done on a few case by case instances.
I mean, I know we don't want buildings sitting empty and not lived in, but we have had presentations in the past around folks that can't find housing.
Yes.
And even if we can postpone it a couple of months, I'm just curious if there's anybody renting it. Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of moving it forward, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.5, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Application 2023-111-RZ is housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw to make minor clarifications and corrections, and staff are in attendance.
Madam Chair and Committee. So this is one of our standard housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw that was adopted on December 8th, 2020. As we go through this very large bylaw, we sometimes find corrections that need to be made or updates to fit the practicality of how it's being interpreted day to day. And this application here, city application, to propose a number of housekeeping amendments, and they're itemized as per the sections in the report. So we don't start off with one, start off with two, just as per the report. So there are a number of minor changes to definitions to provide clarity and consistency of language that are in the report and are in a red line markup version of the bylaw amendment as well to provide ease of reference. There's also a change to clarify that any zone, including a CD zone, which we have a number of them, are included that are not already included in table 2, which is a table at the rear of the bylaw, that they have to conform to the lot area dimensions specified in the zone. So it's really just a very minor wording change because the table in the back of the bylaw just has our standard zones, doesn't have our CD zones. So we just have to make sure there's language that the CD zones meet the size in the bylaw. The next change is a single detached residential use, and detached garden suites are proposed to be allowed in manufactured homes on lots over 0.4 hectares. That is a change. Right now, temporary residential units are allowed, TRUs for family are allowed on lots over 0.4 hectares, but a regular home in a garden suite or a single detached home is not. So this is a change to make this consistent with what we allow for temporary residential units, which sometimes are quite long. They're occupied by family members under an agreement with the city and could be there for up to decades at a time. So I see that as a flexibility option for providing more affordable housing on larger lots. The next is a change that detached garden suites are proposed to be permitted within a modular home. And that is currently allowed for a single detached residential home, interestingly. So if you have a regular single family home, you're allowed to have it in a modular home. And that's not a mobile home. It's just a home that's built on modules and looks often quite like a regular home. But funny enough, the garden suites aren't allowed to be a modular home. The main house is. So we thought that was a bit inconsistent. And there's been some inquiries about that. And the next is that detached garden suites in the RS3 zones located in the agricultural land reserve have an increased building height from 6 meters to 7.5 meters, and to increase the rear lot line setback from 6 meters, 7.5 meters. And those are consistent with the other agricultural zones or A zones throughout the ALR have those heights and setbacks. There's quite a bit of RS3 zone land in the agricultural land reserve, and this is just making it consistent with the other zones there in the agricultural land reserve. And this amendment here is to the forest resource use to allow interpretation educational facilities where permitted in agricultural zones, and to permit a building height to a maximum of 15 meters in the A2 zone. And this came up actually as an issue with the Malcolm Knapp site. It's zoned A2, and basically you would have a 15-meter height for agricultural buildings in these zones. But funny enough, if you're in Malcolm Knapp site or some other large sites, you would have a much lower height. So we thought it was appropriate to make the height for interpretation educational facilities the same 15-meter height as is allowed for agricultural buildings. There's also amendments to correct the density bonus provision wording for the C2 and C3 zones when located on major corridors outside the town center. So there are provisions in those zones and in the bylaw when you have C2 community commercial that basically refers to the major corridor residential designation. Well, these C2 and C3 zones aren't a major corridor residential, they're in commercial. So there was just a miswording in that you had to have for these density bonus provisions to be operationalized, be on a residential major corridor, well, actually just on major corridors. And that's what the change is in the bylaw to reflect the reality of where those zones are located. There are also a number of minor typographical corrections in the R3 and the CD 122 zone that had some hangovers from the previous zoning bylaw. A couple wordings and numbers were not changed from the previous zoning bylaw. And then there is a number of small amendments to the location criteria and setbacks for heat pumps and air conditioners and backup generators in residential zones. So the requirements are located in the bylaw that you can have them in the front or the back, but not the interior side lot lines, which are quite tight between houses normally. And this has come up in that couple of instances where people had a heat pump is on exterior side parcel line and they had to go do border variance. But if it had been in a different location, they didn't. So it would seem to be a bit of an unnecessary criteria. And so we've adjusted those based on review of issues with the building department and the border variance to make these changes to make it less difficult to put a heat pump on your site in a location that was suitable for the neighbors. And the last amendment is, just not quite the last amendment is delete on this page, is to delete the gross floor area calculation rule that when you have a large foyer or space, you count the floor area twice. So if somebody has a lobby foyer and they have a high ceiling, if it's over 14 feet, we count that as 2 floor area ratios as 2 floors. So this is removing that exception as counting it as 2 floors. And the last one is that when the bylaw was adopted, the current bylaw 7600 in December 2020, there were a number of rezoning applications that had received their reading under the old bylaw 3510. And there's a transition provision in the new bylaw that allows them to proceed under the old bylaw because they started in the old bylaw 3500. But once they're adopted, this basically amendment takes 8 of those applications that have received final adoption and formally takes them and puts them into the new zoning bylaw. So it's a transitional provision. The applications under the old bylaw now are transitioned on the zoning map into the new bylaw. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. And I have a motion to move it forward, please. Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Any questions? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation and report. Just a quick question around clause number 4, as I've received some inquiries from the public. Are we saying that if one's lot is equal to or greater than a 0.4 of a hectare, they can have multiple manufactured homes, or within a manufactured home, then they can have an additional suite?
It's, the provision does not change the number of suites and detached, this detached garden units. It's just basically saying the form can be in a mobile home. It's not adding any additional units. It's saying that you can have a detached garden suite and single family residential that are allowed under the zoning now. You're allowed to have those in a mobile home farm or manufactured home form.
Thank you for that. And if the existing dwelling on the property is a manufactured home, would then the bylaw allow for an additional one as a detached garden suite?
Yes.
Or would that be a conflict?
No, it's just a change that would allow that as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That was my question, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Also, I'd just like to say Ann Edwards has worked with the city for a number of years and retired, has all this history, really spearheaded this and did the bylaw amendment, and just wanted to acknowledge Ann for her work on this.
Yes. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that and nice to see you. All right, 5.6.
Application 2023-350-RZ at 24070 128th Avenue and 24195 Fern Crescent to rezone from RS3 to CD 523 to facilitate the development of 48 townhouse dwelling units, and staff are here to attend or present.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone. The subject application at 24070 128th Avenue and 24195 Fern Crescent is for first and second reading of the OCP amending bylaw as previously mentioned and the zoning amending bylaw. The existing OCP, the existing land use designation for the property at 24195 Fern Crescent is medium high density residential, and the land use designation for 24070 128th Avenue is also medium high density residential, and for a small portion neighborhood park. The existing zoning of the subject properties is RS3 single detached rural residential, and the proposed zoning is a CD zone, CD-5-23 based on RM1 zone. The existing site area of the proposed properties is 0.837 hectare to facilitate the development of 48 townhouse dwelling units. This is the subject map showing the subject properties at the southwest corner of 128th Avenue and Fern Crescent. Subject properties are relatively flat. This is an OCP community and official community plan context map showing the land use designation of the subject properties, which is medium high density residential, and only for a small portion on 24070 128th Avenue neighborhood park. This is an ortho map showing the subject properties and the use of it, which is residential currently. And the development proposal, originally a rezoning application was received for these properties to rezone the subject properties from RS3 to R1 and R3 to facilitate subdivision of 27 single family lots, and a first giving was granted. Since then, the subject application has been received to rezone the subject properties from RS3 to a CD zone based on RM1 zone to facilitate development of 48 townhouse units. The subject properties are located in the Horse Hamlet of Silver Valley area plan, and the Silver Valley area plan indicates residential densities range from 50 to 40 units per hectare for the medium to medium low densities located adjacent to commercial use, civic uses, or schools. Given the above, an OCP amendment application is required to redesignate the small portion on 24070 120th Avenue from neighborhood park to medium high density. Also, a text amendment to OCP is required to permit higher density above 40 units per hectare for this site in Horse Hamlet. The proposed development has a residential FSR of 0.832. The applicant is proposing to utilize density provision mechanism in RM1 zone to achieve this FSR by contributing a voluntary cash amount of $669,709. The proposed 48 townhouse dwelling units include 10 3-bedroom units and 38 4-bedroom units, all in a 3-story height configuration and all having a double car garages. The proposed townhouse dwelling units are limited to a maximum of 6 units in one block. Vehicle access is from Fern Crescent. Application is proposing 106 parking stalls in compliance with the off-street and loading bylaw. And should this application proceed to completion, a community amenity contribution at the amount of $355,200 will be applicable. The applicant is also proposing a voluntary cash contribution in the amount of $195,000 towards the improvement of the adjacent neighborhood park. The proposed CD includes the following: reduce setbacks and reduce in parking garage sizes, as explains in this slide. Also, a small increase in the proposed building height from 9.5 meter to 9.6 meter. The front lot line setback reduced from 6 meter to 5 meter. Rear lot line setback reduced from 7.5 meter to 4 meter. Interior side lot line setback reduced from 7.5 meter to 5.7 meter, and exterior side lot line setback reduced from 7.5 meter to 4.5 meter. For the reduction in the size of the parking garages, the internal dimension of the width of the garages reduced from 6.5 meter in 5.8 meters in 2 dwelling units, in 5 dwelling units to 6 meter, and in 41 dwelling units to 6.4 meter. The internal dimension of length of the double car garages reduced in 32 units from 6.5 meter to 5.5 meter in one side and to 6.1 meter in the other side of the garage. In 2 dwelling units to 5.7 meter only on one side of the garage, in 4 dwelling units to 6.2 meter, and in 2 dwelling units to 6.3 meter. A variance has been proposed for this application to subdivision and development bylaw to reduce the required road dedication from 3 meter to 1 meter along 128 Avenue. This is a site plan showing that the access is from Fern Crescent. There are 10 blocks of townhouse units proposed in this application. The maximum number of townhouse units in one block is limited to 6 townhouse units. There are 2 areas allocated for amenity area, and the proposed amenity area is exceeding the requirements of open amenity area in RM1 zone. And it includes sitting area, harvest tables, and play area for kids, and vegetable planters. So the next 2 slides is gonna show perspectives of these 2 blocks. One is from this side, showing the front face of these 2 blocks, and the other one is from this side, showing the back of these 2 blocks. This is a perspective showing the front face of before mentioned townhouse units, and this is a rendering showing the back of those townhouse units. This is a rendering showing the elevation of front of the townhouse units. Again, elevations. And food recommendations have been provided in the report, as well as listed in this slide and next slide. But in general, the staff requesting council to repeal the zone amending bylaw 7791-2021. Also, to grant first and second reading to the OCP amending bylaw and forward this application to public hearing. Also, grant the first and second reading to the zoning amending bylaw and forward this application to public hearing. There are also some other requirements should this application proceed to completion will be required. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to move it forward, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Councillor Schiller.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify about the density that's being proposed. So the existing density for most of the property is medium high density. And there was a slide in there that talked about I think it's what the OCP calls for is between 15 units to 40 units per hectare.
Yes.
Okay. And so what is this development proposing per hectare?
This applicant, through the chair, this application proposing 58 units per hectare.
Thank you. Okay. It is that in line with what the OCP calls for medium high density locations?
Through the chair, the OCP Silver Valley area plan indicates that residential densities can vary from 15 to 40 units per hectare for designations medium to medium low. That is why we are having a text amendment to the OCP to allow a higher density per hectare for this application within Horse Hamlet.
Because it doesn't really speak specifically to this medium high density.
That's correct. Through the
Okay.
chair. That's correct.
Thank you for that. And just on that same note, still the other measurement was given, the 15 to 40 units per hectare. I think that was for lots that are adjacent to schools, commercial and civic uses. Is this lot adjacent to any of those items?
Through the chair, if I may go back to the official community plan context map. Sorry. Should I go back?
Yeah, she's got to do it. The clerk's got to do it. Just a sec.
Sorry.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Through the chair, these sites are designated in OCP tourist commercial. This site is designated neighborhood park. This site is designated medium to medium low and medium to medium high density residential and estate suburban residential. This site, is not currently located adjacent to commercial use exactly or civic use. And that is why we have a text amendment to the OCP to allow a higher density residential for this specific site in Horse Hamlet.
Okay. Thank you for going over that again. Those are my questions.
Okay, Councillor Carreras.
I'm up already. Thank you. I just want to ask about, clearly there's no schools actually anywhere near this site that are available. What does the transit look like currently on Fern Crescent area, and what are the active sort of transportation pieces available to this area?
Through the chair, I may defer this question to engineering department.
I can see Mr. Halpin doing his looking up stuff.
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. We have identified the strategic transportation plan for active transportation improvements along Fern Crescent, so AAA cycling facility. I believe this project includes a multi-use pathway as part of that work. So that would be integrated into the project. This would connect to the proposed bridge location across 240th, which is identified in the near term. In the longer term, we would want to connect all the way to Golden Ears Way Park or Golden Ears Park.
Do we know if there's any transit that runs that area?
There is fairly limited transit in this area. I'd have to look into the maps to get more details for you.
And do
So it's
we, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. And what is, just because I'm sure you have this active transportation plan, just you live and breathe it, I'm sure. Do you know what the time frame is for the implementation of the increased active transportation? Because I know it had everything sort of in a timeline, if I remember correctly.
Through the chair, yes, we did identify short-term projects, which ideally would be completed within a 10-year timeframe, subject to council approval, of course, through the capital planning process. This project, actually, the multi-use pathway proposed by this developer was actually in the longer term. However, it's very close to the active transportation network that we would put on the 240th bridge, which we identified within the 10-year timeframe in the STP. However, as you know, that is subject to senior government support and financial support.
Thank you. And then I just want to go back to Councillor Schiller's because that was one of the pieces I had identified too. So what I'm getting is this density was not envisioned in the Silver Valley area plan. This is higher than the density that was envisioned.
Through the chair, yes, the proposed density is higher than the density within the OCP.
Okay, and and I just sort of did a sort of look around. This is the only townhouse development in this area. The rest sort of look like that are currently ongoing are single family homes.
Through the chair, that's my understanding, but I may defer this question to the manager of development for further clarification.
Yes, it's the only current townhouse project right here, but the designation does allow for townhouse under the RM1 zone to the west and to the north. When you go west on 128th Avenue and north on Mill Street, that medium high density designation would allow for townhouse. This is just a little bit higher density townhouse.
And then can you just talk to the reduction in parking again? Because clearly there's no active transportation, there's no transit. I'm a little unsure about reducing parking when there's nothing else available. So can you just talk me through what the variances are in the parking width?
Through the chair, the proposed parking stalls meet the requirements per the off-street and loading bylaw. The applicant is proposing 106 stalls, which is required for 48 townhouse dwelling units. The reduction is only in the garage sizes.
Yes.
And the reduction varies in different garages and varies even in one garage, it varies like on one side compared to the other side. Having said that, the applicant is proposing a separate space for bike storage as well as garbage and recycling bins.
Like an off-site,
like it's inside the garage.
Inside the garage.
Yes.
And so what is I said you said they vary from, but what is sort of an average reduction in garage size?
Through the chair, the main reduction basically is in the length of the double garages. In 32 units, the required length is 6.7 meter as per bylaw, off-street and loading bylaw. So in 32 units, this 6.7 meter is reduced to 5.5 meter in one side of the garage and 6.2 meter in the other side of the garage. And in two dwelling units, this 6.7 meter is reduced to 5.7 meter only on one side of the garage.
Okay.
And then in four dwelling units, this 6.7 meter is reduced to 6.2 meter, and in two dwelling units is reduced to 6.3 meter. For the width of the garages, the requirement is 6.5 meter, and in 41 dwelling units, this required 6.5 meter is reduced to 6.4 meters. So the reduction is very small.
On the width, mostly in the length. And what is like an average SUV? How long is an average SUV?
Through the chair, I can probably help with that.
Oh, okay.
A typical SUV is about just shy of 2 meters in width. Like
What about length?
a length, you're looking at a RAV4 that's just probably shy of about 4.6 meters. If you're dealing with an F-150 crew cab, like a short box, you're probably just shy of 6 meters, but your width is closer to 2 meters, like 1.9. So those are about the dimensions that you're
So
dealing
it's pretty tight even to get,
with. It's
pretty tight to get a Sorrento in there or just like,
Um,
okay, thank you. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Rumi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Actually, Councilor Carreras was asking the question I was asking, and so I just want to reiterate that. Is there, with the garages, I mean, it's fine, Danny, to say, hey, you're going to park 2 cars there. But we already know that people don't park their cars in the garage. Would this be a disincentive to not park your car in the garage and park it on the street? The setbacks that your dimension from the garage, would it prevent people from actually parking 2 cars in there comfortably and actually using their garage for parking?
Through the chair, there's separate area for bike storage as well as garbage and recycling bins allocated in each garage. And also like the interior design of the units show closets, show a separate bedroom on the first floor. So people might leave their car outside, but for any excuse. But having said that, only 2 small cars have been proposed for the entire proposed number of stalls. So the size of the proposed stalls are regular for regular cars, and the number of proposed stalls is following the requirement of the off-street and loading bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
And if council wants, the applicant is in the audience, so they could maybe speak to the reduction if you want.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Zubin Balamoria talking on behalf of Atelier Pacific Architecture. Could I answer that question? Okay. So we have given a minimum of 5.5 meters, which is the length of the parking stalls. And that is pretty much standard throughout almost all the proposals that we've done in Lower Mainland. I understand Maple Ridge does have their bylaw, which is at 6.2 meters, but we have done other projects even in Maple Ridge, which are having the similar length in stalls. 5.5 meters is an 18-foot stall, which is a standard parking stall just about anywhere if you see in other cities. And hence we thought that this would be sufficient to park even the trucks. Yes, oversized trucks would not fit in that. That would be closing towards the 6-meter mark. But a standard pickup, maybe a small F-150 would easily fit in that. So that's how we've envisaged the parking, and we've tried to provide that space. Also, the spaces that have been earmarked are shown indicative of any service room shutters which might be opening so that they do not encroach within that stall. They have been kept free of that area. So the area that you're actually seeing as 5.5 would be free of even the parking of any shutters that might open into it. So service doors, like if you have the hot water tanks and the furnace rooms, that would be clear of that. Typically speaking, if any of that really needs to be accessed or serviced, then we would usually pull the car out and that it would be easy to open those shutters. But in this case, we have provided the space such that the shutters can be opened even if the car is parked in that space.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of moving it forward? Okay, thank you. It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, 5.7.
Thank you. Application 2022-081-BP/BVP at 22313, 22315, and 22321 Selkirk Avenue. to permit the future construction of a 6-story mixed-use podium-style building with 2 levels of underground parking. And staff are here to present.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair and Committee. The subject site is designated flexible mixed use in the town center area plan. The existing zoning is C3 town center commercial. The site area is approximately 0.3 acres, and the purpose of this application, development permit only, there's no rezoning for this, is to permit the construction of a 6-story mixed-use podium-style building with 2 levels of underground parking. Subject site located at 223rd Street and Selkirk Avenue. This is the OCP town center map showing the flexible mixed-use commercial designation. And this is the orthophoto showing the built environment, which is that location of the site is now a dental clinic. I believe it was a law office previously. And the site is proposed to be developed under the current zoning, the development permit. And the proposal is to allow for 6 ground floor commercial units totaling approximately 6,000 square feet, 51 apartment units ranging from studio to 3-bedroom. As noted, there's no rezoning application required for this site. The 6 commercial parking spaces are located at ground level, and the 2 levels of underground parking are accessed off the rear lane to the north. Proposed FSR is 2.75 density and requires a town center density bonus contribution for that but higher FSR allowed under the zoning of $99,000. Should the development permit and development variance permit be approved by council, they would be forwarded or valid for a 2-year period, as is standard for such development permits and development variance permits after date of issuance. Unit breakdown in this proposal is shown on the screen above with quite a range of units. There's just 1 3-bedroom unit, but there are 8% or 4 2-bedroom and den units, and they range in size. The 2-bedroom and den and 3-bedroom units from 980 square feet to about 1,027 square feet. The units in the commercial level on the ground floor have 2 office units and 4 retail units proposed. There's a proposed variance for this application to reduce the rear lot line setback to 6 meters, from 6 meters to 0 meters on the lane for the ground floor level only, and to waive the requirement for 5% of the lot area of commercial zone lots to be maintained as landscaped area with permeable surface. So building is quite an urban building located in an infill area showing the Selkirk Avenue to the south and 223rd Street to the west, the commercial units on the ground floor, and the commercial customer parking located in the center of this sort of view of commercial uses, and the ramp going down to the underground parking for the residential. And interesting, the rear lot line is actually off to the right. It's just because of the shape of the lot. You would think it's at the lane, but it's actually off to the right by the definitions in the bylaw. To the east, I should say, not the right. This is another plan showing the site plan of the site with the built environment of the roads and the street trees located on the site plan. And here's the parking breakdown for the project. It meets the parking bylaw requirements, and there will be energized EV charges for the commercial parking spaces. It meets all the requirements of the parking bylaw. It's underground levels of parking, the 2 of them below grade. This is a perspective of the building from the corner of Selkirk and 223rd Street. So looking northeast. This is other perspectives from the southeast, looking to the north west, and the corner of 223rd Street in the lane from the rear of the building, looking from the northwest down to the lane elevation of the building. And here are elevations straight on of the north elevation at the top, which is the lane, and the front of a elevation, which is the south. And elevations of the east and west, with the east with the 0 lot line firewall on the top, and then the exterior side west property line on 223rd Street with the commercial retail units at grade. And this is the landscape plan where on level 2 above the commercial level, the first level residential, there's common outdoor open space with basically permeable pavers located on top of the roof membrane with also vegetated green roof sections and planters located on this level, particularly on the east, but also to the north sides of the building. And this is up on the 6th level, the top level of the building, where there's an indoor amenity space and then a common outdoor community amenity space or common outdoor space patio for the residents' use, having a nice view to the north, to the mountains. And so the recommendations are that corporate officer be authorized to sign and seal DVP 2022-81 to reduce the rear lot line setback and waive the permeable surface requirement respecting properties located at 22313, 22315, and 22321 Selkirk Avenue. And further, that the corporate officer be authorized to sign and seal 22081 DP to allow for the future construction of the 6-story building at the same addresses. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. A motion to move it forward, please. Councillor Carreras, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Any questions? Councillor Schiller, followed by Councillor Carreras.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff for that. I believe I saw in there one of the variances that's being required is a request to waive the 5% permeable landscaped area. Can you just explain the rationale for that request?
Madam Chair, through Councillor Schiller, as the site is really very urban site that occupies up to the property lines, there was no location for that to be located. And given the small lot area, 5% of a relatively small site is not seen to be significant. So staff would be in agreement with the variance, given the urban nature of the site and the small nature of the site, and given that there are green roof elements on the 2nd story.
What policy of the cities is it that sets that 5% requirement?
That 5% is set in the bylaw, in the zoning bylaw.
In the zoning bylaw,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see that there is some green infrastructure provided, in the plans that are shown. Do you know what percentage is being provided as proposed?
I could, Madam Chair, through Councillor Schiller, I could look into and get that percent for the council meeting. I don't know it offhand.
I'm just curious if it's close to the 5 or if.
Madam Chair, through Councillor Schiller, I think if you look at the green areas on that roof deck and also the permeable pavers that go into then a roof membrane with then drainage, it would be more than 5%.
More than 5%.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
look, eyeballing it.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carreras.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. So this one has an accessible unit. I'm assuming that's accessible, wheelchair accessible, which is like commend the developer on doing this. I think this is fantastic. But my question is on the parking then. So does an accessible unit automatically have an accessible over and above the 2 that are required? Or will a person living in there have to use one of the 2, like?
I'm not aware of a specific unit, parking space for the accessible unit. So I can look into that going forward to council.
Yeah, I would be interested in that because I think I really appreciated seeing the accessible unit, but we want to make sure that there's the parking that goes along with it, and that that it doesn't reduce what is called for in our regular over and above.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Parks Recreation 8.1, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 8.1 is our film policy and fee update to adopt a comprehensive and modernized film policy and to amend the fees and charges bylaw. Staff are in attendance to present this item.
Good morning.
Good
Actually,
morning.
it's
Good
afternoon now.
Chair and committee. Bait and switch on that one. We're not from Parks and Recreation and Culture, but nonetheless, we will take that as an
Well, you're
honorary
under
title.
that jurisdiction on the agenda. So
Yeah, no
sorry.
doubt. That's all right. So happy Tuesday and thank you for having us here. Wanted to provide some context on the film policy and the proposed fees and charges update. So this really is, I wanted to make sure that we're providing a little bit more context for yourselves. When we look at BC's creative sector, it is quite significant here in the province. Obviously, I think we're all aware. We've seen a number of the movies of the week where you have Santa that's in the summertime here and those types of items. We know there's a lot of activity here, especially in Maple Ridge in the Lower Mainland. And we're certainly wanting to showcase and attract more film into the municipality here. So we have diverse landscapes. We have the use of the production services tax credit. That is a provincial program that we benefit from and make sure that we are competitive with as we're going ahead. And we do continue to be a prime location for on-location work within British Columbia, within Canada, and within North America, which we want to continue with. And that's why we're moving forward with a proposed film policy update and then the fee update as well. Did want to also showcase that we have about 110 productions yearly, and we have just received a report where we rank 4th in on-location filming days in British Columbia, and that's Maple Ridge proper. So kudos to all the work that each one of the different departments we engage with have been doing, and then certainly our film coordinator as well. I should also note that there are about 2,000 residents here that are employed from Maple Ridge themselves in the film industry and the creative industries, which we're wanting to make sure that we're transparent, we're clear, we're providing consistency in our approach for film and film production as we move ahead. And last but not least, I think a very salient point is the last time that this film policy has been updated was 1995. So we're certainly keen to make sure that there is an updated version of this for yourselves. This is it in all of its glory. So feel free to take a minute if you would like to read that. It will not take you any more than a minute whatsoever. Has been helpful for us. That is not to say that this is a bad policy by any stretch of the means. We've been able to use a lot of guidelines in practice to make sure that we are achieving what we need to with our industry here. However, we do want to make sure that we're achieving some nuance here and making sure that it's clear for the industry as they're coming into Maple Ridge. So a few pieces just to be aware of. We've talked about the last time where this policy was first established for us here. Certainly want to be able to showcase that we're a supportive jurisdiction and that we are really wanting to see film here within Maple Ridge and within the region, continue to support those types of items, continuing to update things like our guidelines and our best practices as we move ahead. And by and large are wanting to reflect that there are significant amounts of movies of the week, independent student filming. These are some of the items that the nuance of each one of these, as well as we start to look at features and some of the on-location work for those, where there have been a few gaps that we wanted to update and make sure that we're taking care of. Excuse me. As we move forward, we're really wanting to make sure that we're formalizing those operational guidelines, and those are there within the actual policy itself, speaking to some of those pieces. And once again, it's just to make sure that we're being clear, transparent, and setting expectations within the industry and even for ourselves and other departments as we're working with them. Want to highlight a few of the items in your report. You have the full policy as well, but I did want to highlight a few items here. We certainly recognize that there is diverse architecture and a natural beauty that's here in Maple Ridge that we continue to see a lot of interest from film and creative industries for. So that's within the policy itself. Really wanting to make sure that there is that balance between film industry and the services of that we provide out to our citizens and the general public here as well, and having those be a relevant and a fair balance all the way through. And once again, just being really clear and consistent with our requirements and expectations for filming here within the city. And this applies to production companies as well as staff that are engaging across the city with the industry. We wanted to make sure that we are aligned strategically here, that we're obviously being bold, however, wanting to make sure that we are supporting these priorities of diversified and thriving economy, engaged and healthy community, having good governance and corporate excellence here, and within our own strategy that within economic development, that we're still meeting the needs of those as well. So this is a bit of a waterfall effect, so to speak, where the strategies really are cascading into one another, which is a really great thing. There's very strong alignment. We have worked with a number of different departments. You can see those listed on the screen there, as well as through our leadership team. Had this go through our Economic Development Committee as well. They provided comments. And then we've also had this over to the Film Commission. to Angus Film, which is a contracted film liaison company that we use here as well, that we've had some great successes with, and others copy that best practice, which is a great thing. And they've also noted that there are some opportunities to showcase this proposed policy, if it passes, as a best practice for the region. So I think that's a really excellent thing as well. We do not foresee any impacts on other municipal departments, productions, businesses, or residents, or the 2023 operating budget for this policy here. We do anticipate as we go forward that we're going to continue to be competitive, that we will be hopefully even more competitive. And once again, having very clear guidelines there for folks as well as a policy is a very positive thing for us. When we look at the fees and charges, there are a few areas that I did want to highlight as well. There are a number of the fees that are unchanged whatsoever. So didn't want to make sure that we were keeping an eye to competitiveness. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality as well. So those all worked, that we reconfirmed. There were some that were adjusted. So we're one of the rare municipalities for permit application fees where we allowed up to 6 locations on a single permit. That put us at a bit of a disadvantage where we had a number of process and paperwork to be dealt with without the companies actually paying for those types of items. So we've adjusted those fees, knowing that there's otherwise an impact on us operationally. Special effects permit, that was increased a little bit, as same with the parking lot rental rate. But all very much in line with regional competitors that are here, not going to be something that's going to dissuade industry from coming in here whatsoever. It's just more in line to be able to cover our costs and make sure that we're once again competitive as we kind of go into the next few years here, and certainly do anticipate that we'll see an increase in film as we move ahead. And then we also brought in some new items. So we more equitably want to be able to deal with groups like nonprofits, like students and others that we've had a reduced fee come into the area here and some flexibilities on. We're busy working away with our partners in PRC on the waterfront lot. So having some electrical capacity into that area there, and part of our sustainability initiatives, and then a noise exemption fee, knowing that also does impact our groups within bylaw or others that we're relatively silent on. So wanted to make sure that we were taking care of those. So that is basically it. Certainly here for any comments, questions, or otherwise. And just thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward? Moved by Mayor Rumi, seconded by Councillor Youssef. Any questions? Councillor Youssef and then Councillor Dozy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation and report. Just real quick, memory serves me correctly, in 2021, Metro Vancouver Climate Action Committee was looking at reduction of emissions of non-road going diesel engines. And there was actually a presentation by the film industry that was given to the committee. Are we targeting frequented locations within the municipality with electric connections, not only to reduce emissions, but also to be able to provide the film industry with that capacity if they are in Maple Ridge outside of the waterfront?
Through the chair. So waterfront is going to be the first area that we're targeting on here. That's a part of this budget this last year that we've had come through. So that's a kiosk that would be taking care of crew parks and or circus in some of the cases where they could plug into those. And that's the exact reason, is to make sure that we are providing good service for one, and then having the decarbonization efforts moving ahead and sustainability top of mind. So that's something that we're going to continue to look at. We want to make sure that numbers come back to us as this is installed and we see usage. We have a certain year payback, so to speak, that we're looking at, that hopefully we can expand to other areas that we see high frequency with in the future, but we need to prove out this first area first.
Thank you for that. I'm looking forward to further proliferation of that ability throughout the frequented locations. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for the comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dozy.
Oh, I pass.
You're going to pass. Councillor Carreras.
Just a quick question on the student flat rate of $50. It's like very expensive to be a student. 2 kids in school, so I know how expensive and how difficult it is even to come up with $50. How does that compare to other cities?
Through you, Madam Chair. So when we did a review of, there were 6 other areas. So Abbotsford, Burnaby, Coquitlam, Langley, Township of Langley, Mission, and Pitt Meadows. Some were relatively silent on it or did not deal with it at all. And we felt the $50 for those that we did see any other nonprofit or student on there, at the $50 piece is reasonable. Normally, that's going to be paid through either the schools or in some of the cases, the post-secondary institutions, if they're in them for student projects. We are not seeing this as something where someone has a, either on their iPhone or anything else, and it's a school project in grade 6. They do not need to get a film permit from us.
So you're saying that the schools pay
In some of the
for
cases,
the
they do.
filming
If they were in a
fee?
if they're in a film school, or if it's for a major kind of project, like a major kind of filming project, they will generally end up either including that with some of their tuition, or will be a part of some of the final projects for them.
Okay, that's unusual, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you about the first, a question about the fee schedule. I'm not familiar with I took a look at the fee schedule at the end of the report, but could you walk me through either now or on next Tuesday, sort of for level 2 films? So I'm looking at movie of the week, independent commercials, and level 3, so feature films, TV series level 2. Could you sort of walk me through what fees they would face, or they would be looking at paying to the city? I'm seeing and I just want to set a context for myself to better understand, because I see a whole list of fees there, and I don't know what that looks like at the end.
Through you, Madam Chair. So think for any of as the levels come through, those are more equitable charges for each area, or the intensity of the production, so to speak. So if you're an independent and you're at a level 1, then you're really not going to have a whole lot of crew that's with you. You're not going to have a whole lot of trucks that are with you. You're not going to have a whole lot of impact on the community. So that's a lesser charge, because there's less really that we have to provide out on that front. If you're the movie of a week and you have, say, 50 folks that are out there, 60 folks, something that way, 6 or 7 trucks, some of those types of items, then you would go to likely a level 2, or otherwise as it goes on to the items here. Still, your initial film permit and others are going to remain the same. It's only when you're looking at some of the regional parks, or if you're looking at some of those areas that are noted on the fees there for particular levels, that we generally see more activity, more requirement of liaison work, those types of items that we're really looking to have that more equitable. And same with the feature, right? If you have hundreds of folks that are out within a location, it's more complex to deal with. There's a lot more on a regulatory side that we need to deal with. Then we're just saying that, look, let's make sure that we're not painting everyone with the same brush. Let's still be very fair, but let's make sure that we're just kind of making sure that we're dialing that in appropriately.
That makes sense. Thank you. Through the chair again, like that makes sense on just making sure that we charge people the only amount that we need to charge them, and not more. Just for our understanding, as we move into next week, when we make the council decision, it would be helpful for me to just see, sort of there is no typical, but sort of an average level 2 film, or an average level 2 production, and average level 3 production. You give us sort of a sample, sample line item invoice. This is what they might be looking at, or that would be just keeping in mind that this is such a large industry for Maple Ridge, and would be helpful for me, and perhaps others, particularly me, to have that context, make sure I have the context to understand what our municipality, what we are charging them. So that's one. The second that I just want to a question, please. It was wonderful to hear that Creative BC and also Angus had positive comments. Could you please share the feedback with us, sort of in paper form, before the next meeting?
Yeah,
wonderful.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that shouldn't be an issue whatsoever.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Rumi.
Thank you for the presentation, and I recognize the importance of filming in Maple Ridge and what it does to our economy. Can you just elaborate for me on the noise exemption fee? What is it we're actually talking about there?
Through you, Madam Chair. So noise exemption is generally something that we end up having. Film coordinator will have engagement that needs to go through with bylaw. Bylaw in some of the cases may need to manage some of the concerns of residents or anything else. So it's just a recognition that there's more engagement that we require with those that are on site. Normally, if it's going to be a hotter location, that we would do polling on site there, making sure that we're connecting with the residents, having the production do so. That's the production's responsibility, and that there's dialogue that's created between all of them there. If there's specific confines where, say, if it's particular hours after 11 o'clock or something that way, where there may be some activity, then there may need to be that application for noise exemption so that they're not in contravention of our bylaw, or if there's a particular decibel level, so to speak, that they anticipate. And there would be an associated fee just because it's something that we haven't really charged for in the past, and it does translate to additional work from our end of things.
Which is good. I appreciate that. I guess what I'm trying to get to is that if you're in a residential area and can you apply for a noise exemption fee for midnight without actually talking to people around you? Like, how far does that go?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that is, they would be able to apply for a noise exemption permit. However, we still generally do require that the production would be engaging with those all throughout the area. So you would either see them, say in the case of Goosebumps, they walked all throughout the neighborhood there and made sure that folks were okay with their production being within the area, compensated them otherwise if there were some challenges, or if they needed to get a hotel or wanted to get a hotel somewhere else, or if they just still wanted to be in the area, but also notified to them, look, it's going to be louder after midnight, or we're filming overnight. And then for them to not be in contravention of our bylaws, then there's that fee to it, because then there's the associated paperwork and then oversight and those types of items.
Yeah, as long as that is actually stipulated as part of the noise exemption fee, I'm okay with that. Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other questions. So all in favor of moving it forward? Opposed, carried unanimously. Thank you. And last item on our agenda, 8.2.
Thank you. This is the sponsorship, advertising, and naming rights policy 4.34, which will provide staff with framework protocols and procedures necessary to facilitate opportunities for consistent and sustainable revenue generation from these types of business relationships. And staff are here to present.
Thank you very much. Mr. Denton. Okay.
Is there a passage?
And we are. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you in advance for your time and for taking the time to listen to me run through this. So we have provided you with a fairly comprehensive policy. And sort of the catalyst for this was multiple sort of pressures or factors. We've got a number of capital projects coming down the pipeline, number of assets coming online in the coming years. We've also got economic development, parks, recreation, culture, introducing a number of new events and activities in the town center. And at the same time, we've also had a number of overtures, shall we say, from corporate entities and advertising agencies, media buyers, looking at creating relationships with the city with respect to the assets that we do have. And so when we took a look at all of those things and looked at what policy tools and mechanisms we had available to ourselves, it was one of those we needed to enhance what we did have to be able to provide ourselves with a stronger, more robust framework moving forward. So when we look at what are we trying to achieve at the purpose of the new policy, ultimately we're looking to create, new and incremental revenue streams to support these capital projects, operational programs coming down the pipeline. We wanted to provide a framework for the city's acceptance of financial or in-kind contributions. So managing, what is the criteria by which we will entertain a particular offer or interest in kind. We have two policies in place currently, 4.2, which is a sponsorship policy, and 4.28, which is a parks and facilities advertising policy. So we wanted to roll the tenets contained within these ones into, again, a more robust framework to provide not only staff, but also sort of council with those checks and balances by which we can ultimately evaluate, are we heading in the right direction with any potential relationships moving forward? And then ultimately, we wanted to ensure that we are in alignment with council's mission, vision, core values, and strategic priorities. Scope of this policy, it does apply across the board. So to all city business units, departments, assets, any commercial naming rights and paid advertising opportunities within any of our existing and new facilities coming online. What it doesn't apply to is P3s, partnered facilities. Hypothetically, if we were to partner with a YMCA or YWCA, not-for-profits, philanthropic contributions. So again, strict donations, government grants, historical or commemorative naming rights. And again, Greg Moore Youth Center, for example, and or streets. The policy is also loaded with a number of definitions. Sponsorship marketing is no different from any other sort of marketing discipline in that it has somewhat of a language unto itself. So when we're talking about assets and we're talking about title sponsorship and proposals, we wanted to be very clear and transparent as to what we're actually talking about. And not only for us internally, but also for the external audiences that we're going to be reaching with this. There is language in the policy that talks to proposals, the agreements, and the endorsements. And this includes, again, the procedures, policies, and the protocols by which staff can accept financial or in-kind donations. So again, what we want to do is be able to determine how we're going to evaluate proposals that we do receive or interest in our properties. How do we paper these things in terms of what does the agreements look like? And ultimately, what are the limits of our endorsements? So how and what are we able to say, or what are we willing to say about anybody that we're doing partnering with or having sponsored us? Again, the policy outlines those pretty clearly. Costs and finance, ultimately, we wanted to determine where do the revenues go, are they accounted for, how, when, and where can they be spent? And again, policy very clear in terms of the creation of a specific reserve fund that would allow, again, funds to go in and then to be dispersed accordingly as per the limits of the policy. Naming, there is a section in the policy that talks about naming rights and with the renaming of existing city assets. Staff recognize that there are a tremendous amount of sensitivities around naming and renaming city assets. And so we wanted to be clear how we would approach any sort of opportunities that might come or any inquiries that might come our way with respect to naming of facilities. And then restrictions and compliance, again, that specifies who the city's willing to do business with. And again, we're pretty clear in terms of who we will and who we will not do business with. And ultimately, most sponsors or asset holders will do that. I have worked with a number in the past where, certainly like blood sports or alcohol, and again, we've laid out all the basics to ensure that who we're dealing with reflects who we are as a municipality, but also our taxpayers and our target audiences as well. And then ultimately it comes down to the roles, responsibilities. We've got clear language in the policy that identifies who's going to approve what, when, and how, the role of council, and again, the dollar thresholds by which we will bring things forward, and again, those approval levels too as well. So again, ultimately, we believe it's a pretty robust policy. We have taken lead and best practices from a number of other jurisdictions, strong support from the PRC team in putting this together in order to be able to come up with one that we believe will take us through the next number of years and be able to put us on a really strong foundation. So the recommendation is the staff report dated December 5th, 2023, titled Sponsorship, Advertising, and Naming Rights Policy 4.34, be forwarded to the council meeting of December 12th, 2023. And I would welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward, please? Moved by Councillor Carrera, seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Councillor Carreras.
Thank you. I'm glad this came forward. I've been asking for it for a little bit. I just want to talk about the naming policy. So So this would be regardless of any sort of financial impact, this would be our policy that covers anything naming.
As related to the involvement of a partner, yes,
Okay.
like a corporate partner. And again, we've delineated where there wouldn't be naming rights. So yeah, it gives them both the
Okay.
positives and negatives.
So if we were renaming a park with an Indigenous name that falls outside of this, what policy does that fall under?
I believe that would fall outside the policy.
I see
Defer to
Mr.
Valerie on
Schmidt
this one, but
going for the
yes.
microphone.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So there is a park naming policy that currently exists, and that would fall within that.
Okay, I was trying to find it online. I couldn't find it. And then if there was like a room or something that was named after a community member who had significant impact in the community, that would be in that policy outside of this one?
That would fall under the commemorative naming, so it would fall outside of this policy.
Okay. Outside of this. Okay. And then my other question is how does this impact buildings that we own but are operated by nonprofits such as the Act?
Again, this excludes not-for-profit operated buildings,
So even if we own the building, the Act could still seek sponsorship and advertise that in our building?
the Act has their own sponsorship relationships and donor relationships as well. So they run that independently. But again, I'll defer to Valerie. But yes, it would be, this one would be excluded. The Act would be excluded as well.
All right.
And just for one piece of clarification, so the agreement with the Act describes what they're enabled to do within that building.
Okay,
our
and
building.
so when we redo the operating agreement, it will reflect this new, because my concern is always that a separate organization enters into an agreement with an organization that doesn't align with our policy and it's our building, so.
Agreed. We would look for alignment.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then I had one more question. When it came to the use of the funds, hold on. Oh, sorry. I'm forgetting this one's separate, so it's on a different computer. When it comes to, where does it say the cost of finance? So anything from a sponsorship, partnership, and advertising would go into a reserve fund. And it looks like the use of it is in an operating budget and a capital budget. So we would use it for furthering new facilities, not for the one that they've put the money towards.
Typically, yes. I mean, that's the way, unless it was a specific naming for a building, then that obviously would go, the funding would go towards, the costs would be borne by the sponsoring agency or the naming agency, but the funds would go into the fund. And if the determination was made at the end of the day that it should fund the actual facility, then that would be at the discretion.
Okay, I mean, because I get the maintenance of the building. I do have a question on their operating budget and program delivery. I'm wondering if I can seek clarification on program delivery, assuming that a program would be an ongoing funding and this is typically one-time funding. Why we would use one-time funding for an ongoing operating piece?
If I could step into that one.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that question once again. So this would allow enhancements to our programs. So recognizing that the funding source wouldn't be ongoing, it would allow those enhancements during the time frame of the sponsorship agreement.
Okay. And then, sorry, just tell me when my time, okay, I'm closing this, so I'm not getting myself confused. Keep going to the wrong laptop here, sorry. In the naming piece, city assets of historic or community significance, did we want to put geographic significance in there too? I know a lot of other naming policies are historic, geographic, and community.
We could certainly look at that. Absolutely.
Okay, and then the only other piece, just cleaning up some of the language where it said, and it may be in, I saw it in the other ones, where it talked about alcohol, tobacco, and other addictive.
Yeah.
Do we need to spell out alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, which is now legal? if we're going to do alcohol and tobacco, we should do cannabis or just put in there just addictive substances. Just a question to think about.
Through the chair, I think if we went with addictive substances, that might be a bit broad. But tobacco and cannabis, and again, firearms, pornography, vaping sort of a new addition to that sort of list, which again, we relied on sort of the best practices and the language that we took from other jurisdictions, which seemed to be quite comprehensive, and that allowed us that flexibility.
Okay. And I think that is it. Oh, and are we going to take into context, because I've seen this piece and it may be in here somewhere, but we got this report a little bit late, that the funding for it will take into account sort of that it would be appropriate for the size and visibility of the building. So if it's one of our larger assets, the financial donation would match that larger asset. Do we have something in this policy that talks to matching the visibility and size?
Through the chair, any negotiations would take into account the value of the property and would undergo a very rigorous analysis to be able to determine what the value is. Okay. And again, I've worked with a number of different agencies over the years that is their strong suit in terms of being able to identify, and looks at everything in terms of comparable buildings. It looks at exposure opportunities, attendance demographics, and psychographic. Everything like that goes into essentially a blender and comes up with a value. So no, we would definitely have, and again, a strong analysis component to any of the deals that we would bring forward.
Okay.
To ensure that they are
do we need to
commensurate.
have something like that in the policy?
Again, if we look at how we're going to evaluate them, and I'll go back to proposals. So if you actually, item number 1 is proposals, and it looks to, again, how are we going to evaluate quality of them, timeliness, the net value, the desirability, image, reputation. Term of the agreement plays a big role too as well. So yeah, all of those factors go into determining what the value and ultimately what the price is of an asset that we're looking to sell.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do anybody else have any questions? Okay, all in favor of moving it forward? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Madam Clerk, moving on to community forum.
Thank you. Participants in the community forum are reminded there should be no discussion of public hearing bylaws which have not yet reached conclusion. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak, and the total time allotted for community forum is 15 minutes. A second opportunity may be provided once all speakers in the queue have had an opportunity. Please clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. If you're participating electronically, please use the raise hand icon, and when called upon, turn on your camera. If attending in person, please come forward to the podium when the chair invites speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone in the chambers wish to address council? If so, please come to the microphone. And anyone online wishing to address council, please raise your virtual hand. I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, well, with that, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, your chair. To yourself and members of council, I just want to, this is a little impromptu, but I wanted to acknowledge Sedalia Martin, who is sitting in the audience. She joined us last week as our new Director of Recreation Services. So we're pleased to have Sedalia join the team. Sedalia has her bachelor's degree in recreation management. For the past 4 years, she's been the Director of Programs and Operations with the BC Wildlife Federation, which is BC's largest conservation organization. In her past life, she went on to open 3 recreation centers in a leadership capacity at the Surrey Sport and Leisure Center, the Tong Louis Family YMCA, and the Robert Lee YMCA. Sedalia's worked public, private, and nonprofit recreation settings for most of her career, and we're happy to have her join the Corporation of Maple Ridge. So with her, you'll see her walking the halls and in the community, but I wanted the opportunity to introduce you to Sedalia. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much and welcome. We're happy to have you. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we're adjourned. And how long before?
We have a fairly